Hey there everyone, this is Kyle Grove once again back for another video. And ladies and gentlemen, this past month marked the 10th anniversary of a special cartoon that has meant a lot to me over the past few years. Like ever since I came across this show 10 years ago, it really started changing my life for the better, and it introduced me to a whole new dynamic of cartoons, and I've considered it one of my favorite shows ever. Like long before My Little Pony Friendship is Magic and all the other shows that I'm watching nowadays, there was this show, and every time it was on TV, I would check it out on Disney Channel or Disney XD, because it's meant so much to me, and it's been a fantastic cartoon. So I thought it would be nice talking about my experience growing up with the classic Disney Channel show, Phineas and Ferb. That's right, guys, Phineas and Ferb is now 10 years old. The adventures of the two stepbrothers have been around for quite a long time. And now that the show has turned 10 years old, I thought it would be nice to talk about the show with this video, and I haven't seen much 10th anniversary celebration stuff online. Like, I've seen some fan art on DeviantArt and a few journals, but not much of it is going on online, so I thought, why not put together this video? Especially since I want to dedicate this video to everyone who helped put the show together and made it what it is today, especially creators Dan Povenmire and Jeff Swampy Marsh. Those guys are awesome. Like, had it not been for their creative talent and leadership, this show wouldn't exist and my life would be so much different, because when Phineas and Ferb first arrived, I've been treated to an adventure that has brought me a lot of joy, a great adventure, lots of laughs, some awesome songs, all sorts of great stuff. And so yeah, I thought it would be nice talking about my experiences with the show and how much it means to me and all the great stuff that I've seen from it. Now, I've watched the show for years, and this has been my first time talking on YouTube for quite some time, so I do have a lot of stuff to talk about, but I'll try my best, and feel free to share in the comments your thoughts on Phineas and Ferb. But yeah, it's the 10th anniversary, what can I say? But yes, I was around 13 years old when Phineas and Ferb first arrived in 2007. Back then, I was going through middle school, and that was an adventure in itself. Not in the same way as this show was, but yeah, I was going through middle school, and it was really challenging. I mean, I got used to the whole system of now that I had to go to certain classes around the building, not just sticking in one room. But during that time, I was already into cartoons, and my main channel to go to was Nickelodeon, and occasionally I would also go to Disney Channel. Unfortunately, though, I would consider this time of my life a dark age for cartoons. Like you gotta remember, guys, back then there were a lot of cartoons that were either just neutral or decent but not memorable, and there were occasionally shows that were just downright awful and disgusting to watch. Like I'm obviously not gonna name them off the top of my head because I have a Phineas and Ferb video to talk about, but But the point is, it was different back then, and I'm sure a lot of cartoon fans out there will know what I'm talking about when they look back on that decade. Especially if they're from the 90s, because the 90s was a golden age for cartoons. On Nickelodeon, we had stuff like the Nicktoons, like, Real Monsters, and Rugrats, Rocko's Modern Life, and other cartoons like Hey Arnold, The Wild Thornberrys, Cat Dog, all sorts of amazing stuff. While on the Disney Channel, Playhouse Disney included, we had stuff like Timon and Pumbaa, House of Mouse, Buzz Lightyear Star Command, The Legend of Tarzan, PB&J Otter, Woli Poly Oli, The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, all sorts of awesome stuff that's just so nostalgic and great to look back on. But during the time of 2006, 2007, those shows were either like they ended or they got canceled, and they were replaced with these new shows that were either just meh or not very good. But like I said, I'm not going to name all of them off the top of my head. Two examples that I probably should bring up, though, would have to be the two Nickelodeon shows, SpongeBob SquarePants and The Fairly OddParents. I mean, granted, those shows are awesome, and they were a great part of my childhood as well, but, they're still going on to this day, and back then, I started noticing that they were running out of ideas, and some of the stuff that they were showing just wasn't as good as some of the earlier episodes. Like, they were being milked into something that was going on for far too long. I mean, not saying that I now hate the shows by any means. I mean, I prefer sticking with the earlier episodes of both shows, especially SpongeBob, since I still consider it one of my favorite shows ever. But all that said, it's not to say that this dark age didn't have any good shows that I liked. Like, there was pre-movie SpongeBob, like the episodes that came before the first movie. There was the Penguins of Madagascar TV show. There was Back at the Barnyard, which nowadays I now have mixed feelings towards. While on the Disney Channel, I stuck with mostly Playhouse Disney stuff like Little Einsteins and My Friends Tigger and Pooh. But eventually, I would catch my first glimpse of Phineas and Ferb, and it didn't really catch my attention right away, especially since some of the characters look so weird. Like Phineas has a triangle-shaped head. Like, who came up with that idea? Like, that was not intended to be a knock against Phineas's design or the creator by any means. Like, if anything, Phineas's design is so memorable and awesome. Like, but anyways, yeah. My first introduction to Phineas and Ferb, or first glimpse, I should say, was kind of neutral. But it wouldn't be until, I believe, 2009 or 2010 when I became fully interested in checking out the show, because during that time it was also when the internet was expanding with its technology and websites like YouTube and Facebook. Like, YouTube was starting to become one of my biggest interests in the world. Like, it was a website with all these videos, and it had cartoons that I hadn't seen in so long. And there were episodes of shows like Beast Wars that I hadn't checked out yet and were starting to get into. It was amazing. And also, during that time, it was when YouTube wasn't as crazy with its copyright shenanigans and whatnot. But yeah, it was different back then. And it was also during this time where I was scrolling through some of the videos of my subscriptions at the time, and one of them had footage from Phineas and Ferb. Like, it was footage of the Flop Stars episode where Isabella, Gretchen, Addison, and Millie were singing with Phineas and Ferb during the Gitchy Gitchy Goo sequence, and I don't know, something about that glimpse of footage, it got me intrigued in checking out the show much more, and with that in mind, I decided to look up the show, and I don't know if it was my long memory or just dumb luck or what, but I rediscovered the show, and on YouTube, there were some full episodes from the show, and my first episode was Isabella in the Temple of Sap, and my interest in the show just started from there, and that was it. And as time went on, I found myself wanting to watch more episodes, so I went back on YouTube and I started watching more, like Bubble Boys and Hide and Seek, That Sinking Feeling, Got Game, Atlantis, etc., etc., and I discovered there's a lot more to this show than meets the eye. It's basically about these two stepbrothers who are on summer vacation and therefore are on a mission to make the most of it. To do this, they make a number of inventions and do a lot of activities, like not the ones you would expect someone of their age to do, like they make a roller coaster that goes through their neighborhood, an actual beach in their backyard, they become NASCAR racers in one episode, they make giant treehouse robots that fight each other, they go find the lost city of Atlantis, the list goes on and on. But whatever they're doing, it often gets on the nerves of their big sister Candace, who, whenever she sees they're up to something, she tries to get them in trouble by showing their activity or inventions to their mother, Linda. Or she likes to say, she tries to bust them. But while this is going on, there's always a side story involving the family's pet platypus, Perry. Like, whenever the family or friends are around, he always depicts himself as a mindless platypus. But when they're off doing their thing, or if their backs are turned for a minute, Perry switches from mindless pet to secret agent platypus, who sneaks away to fight the evil Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz, who's trying to take over the tri-state area using his variety of inventions, or innators as he personally calls them. And, whatever the outcome of their conflicts are, the consequences of their confrontations always, or usually, leads to the disappearance of Phineas and Ferb's inventions or activities, and this causes Linda to miss whatever they're doing and leave Candace in total shock. And Perry returns to the family in his mindless state. So yeah, this formula is played out in virtually every episode of the show, and it can get very repetitive. I know when I first started getting into the show, I noticed the repetitiveness of this formula, and one had to wonder, what was it about this show that made it so successful and popular? Was there more to it than just a simple formula? Well, as it turns out, there was actually. While the formula that I mentioned was very repetitive and somewhat tedious at first, the show incorporated elements that more than made up for that, some of which made the show very unique and appealing. For starters, there's the humor of the show, which would occasionally reference some other movie or cartoon. There's that awesome soundtrack with songs that are triumphant, catchy, sometimes emotional. But one major factor about the show that made it so appealing would have to be undoubtedly the characters portrayed. This is something that actually caught my attention when I started watching the show. The characters were so fun, and many of them brought a charm to the show that made them so appealing, and many of them won their way into my heart. In fact, it didn't take long for me at all to consider them not just some of my favorite Disney characters, but some of my favorite cartoon characters in general. Of all the characters that were introduced in this show, my all-time favorites are Phineas, Ferb, Isabella, and the Fireside Girls. Starting with Phineas, he's depicted as this creative and ambitious kid who, like I said, is on summer vacation and therefore is trying to make the most of it with his stepbrother Ferb. His creativity and inventiveness is one of the driving factors that usually kicks off the plot of the show, and there also came times where it reminded me of the old Nickelodeon show The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. But it's not just his creativity and determination that make him such a great character. One trait about him that I absolutely adore is his kindness. Like, there are many, many instances throughout the show that reveal that Phineas absolutely loves his family and cares for his friends as well. In fact, there are also some episodes where not only does he try to make something for fun purposes, but he also tries to do them to help others. Like, be it one of his friends or family members, even Candace, he would not hesitate to lend a helping hand. Some fine examples of this include the episode where he and Ferb helped their friend Baljeet make a portal to Mars. There was one where they helped Isabella feel better after she got her tonsils removed by trying to make her an ice cream sundae. Heck, there was an episode where he tried to scare Isabella's hiccups away by making a haunted house. It might not have worked out the way he thought, but it still shows how much of a loving character he is. But some of the greatest examples of Phineas's kindness and devotion to his loved ones usually include the ones where he tries to help Candace with whatever she's doing. Like, despite Candace's constant attempts to get him and Ferb in trouble, Phineas absolutely loves Candace and looks up to her as well. There are many episodes that show this, and I don't think I can name them all off the top of my head, but it's still a very heartwarming factor, and another reason why Phineas is such a great character, with his creativity, his determination, and kindness. Heck, he'd be a fun character to hang out with, along with Ferb. And unlike the Jimmy Neutron show, where the main character's intelligence causes him to be looked down upon by others, in this case, Phineas's creativity and intelligence actually make him a very popular kid in his neighborhood. In fact, they're a reason why Isabella developed a crush on him and is therefore endlessly supportive of him in whatever he does. Speaking of Isabella, like I said, she's one of my favorite characters in the show too, for a number of reasons. For starters, there's her kindness and her support towards Phineas, as well as her crush on him. Like, whenever she's in an episode, she'll come into the backyard and be all, "What you doing?" Heck, when she says that for the very first time in the first episode Roller Coaster, she has hearts in her eyes. If that was not an indication of her having a crush on Phineas, I don't know what would be. But yeah, it's very cute when she says that, and she's always a fun character to watch. But there's a lot more to Isabella than just that. She's also an action girl, being the leader of the Fireside Girls in Danville, and therefore is very skilled and has a very good knack for leadership as well. That was something that I immediately noticed when I started watching the show. Heck, the fact that my first episode was Isabella in the Temple of Sapt definitely helped that cause. Like, these were girls who looked very cute and lovable, but they were also very badass and awesome in whatever they were doing. Like in Isabella in the Temple of Sap, they were trying to get this tree that could help the boys with their bubble machine, and they went to extreme heights to get it, with some pretty kick-ass results. And since they were the main characters of that episode, it made me look forward to seeing them in other episodes that I watch as time would go on. Because of that, Isabella and the Fireside Girls are some of my favorite characters for their determination and what they do in each episode they're in. They're action girls, what can I say? Now as for Ferb, like Phineas, he's very intelligent and creative, but also very helpful, but of the two, he's the more quiet one. Like, he'll only say one or two lines each episode, usually leaving all the dialogue and talking to Phineas. But whenever Ferb does talk, he speaks in a low British-like accent, and it further goes to show that there's a lot more to Ferb than people give him credit for. And it's another interesting way of showing that it's the quiet ones you have to watch out for, like... or maybe not so much watch out for, but take notice of as well. Not just with his talking, but also with what he does, too. Like, he's very, very skilled. Not just in creating things like Phineas, but like helping others, like in that episode, Vanessa Roughness. Like, in that episode, he went above and beyond and out of his way to help Vanessa retrieve that potassium, whatever it is. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but he went out of his way to help her retrieve that, and he did an amazing job in doing so. Like, he was not backing down one bit. Like, he was giving it his all to help Vanessa, and while the end result wasn't what they both expected, it earned him a new friend, and yeah, it further goes to show that Ferb is just as awesome as Phineas. No questions about it. And it's also a nice way of showing that actions can speak louder than words. Kinda like what happens with Spike in the Land Before Time series. But yeah, that's one major reason why Ferb is such an awesome character, and why he's so fun to watch, just like Phineas. Now, as for the other characters that are alongside these guys, most of them bring a likability to the show, and they bring a lot of energy and fun. Some of them really weird me out, like Irving. The one character that I will say that I have the most complex feelings towards would have to be Candace. Throughout most of the show, and in virtually every episode, she's often depicted as the over-controlling sister who disapproves of Phineas and Ferb's activities, and usually she'd be all, "You guys are so busted!" and go through whatever lengths she has to go through in order to show Linda what they're doing. These most of the time end in failure, and they're one reason why I often find her extremely annoying and hard to deal with. Like, even when they're doing something that doesn't affect her directly, like jumping on that gelatin pool, she'll try to get them in trouble. Or if they're trying to help someone, like in that episode where they were putting together a birthday party for Isabella, she'll try to get them in trouble even for that. And even in that one episode where they decide not to do anything, she tries to get them in trouble as well by building a giant dinosaur slide, or I think that's what it was, and then try to bust them like that. Good lord. There were also some episodes where, even though she wasn't trying to bust them, she still acted like a serious jerk. Like in that Aglet episode where she's all like, "It doesn't matter! It doesn't matter! It doesn't matter!" I'm always like, "Shut up, Candace! Let them have their fun!" Good lord. Sorry about that, but... But yeah, the point is, she's very hard to deal with in many of the episodes, and it can be easy to assume that she's the one character that I always hate. But, there are actually some traits about her that I find very likable, and even some episodes where I feel really sorry for her. Not in the sense that she fails to bust her brothers, but here's what I mean. When she's not in busting mode, or if she's off doing her own little adventure that doesn't involve Phineas and Ferb, there can be times where I feel bad for her, and find her in a conflict where I can relate to her in some way. One of the best examples of this regard would have to be the Nerds of a Feather episode, where we learn that she's actually a fan of this kid's show called Ducky Momo. And yeah, that episode, even though I'm not really into it, it does have a nice side story with Candace, and the conflict that she goes through in that episode where she tries to collect some Ducky Momo collectibles without anyone knowing. Yeah, I felt really bad for her because I used to be like that too when I was younger, with my interests like in Little Einsteins and Winnie the Pooh and some of the Nick Jr. shows at the time like Backyardigans and Wow Wow Wubsy and Wonder Pets. I used to be like that, but nowadays I'm confident with my interests and I have no problem with expressing them. I mostly have My Little Pony to thank for that, but the point is I could relate to her in that sense, and it made a very heartwarming side story in that episode. There also come episodes where she's focused on her boyfriend Jeremy, and and how she wants to impress him and all sorts of other stuff. Even though she can be a little overdramatic in some of the episodes, it's still understandable because she wants to impress him. And yeah, he's a very easygoing fellow though, and they usually end in happy endings and whatnot. But the biggest trait about Candace that I love the most is that she loves her brothers just as much as they love her. Like, despite her constant annoyance with what they do, she would be heartbroken if she ever lost them in any way. This is seen in many of the episodes, like Gaming the System, where she thought she lost them when they were trapped in that video game, and many other episodes. One of the best examples as well would have to be Traffic Cam Caper, where after a moment of hesitation, she chooses to save Phineas from falling off a bridge rather than a disc containing all the footage of some of their activities in the episodes prior to that one. And yeah, she said it best. You may be a pain, but you are my brother. That is a great example of how much of a likable character she can be depending on what happens. So yeah, at the end of the day, Candace is a mix for me. Like, she can get very annoying in many of the episodes, but in the episodes where she's not annoying and where she's actually having fun with everyone else, that's when she can be very lovable. Besides, I've seen much worse characters in cartoons. I'm just not going to name them off the top of my head right now, but... Now, as for the characters in the B-plot, like Perry the Platypus and Doofenshmirtz, while I do prefer the characters in the A-plot, like Phineas, Ferb, Isabella, and all the others, the characters in the B-plot are just as fun to watch as the others are. Like Doofenshmirtz, for example. He's often depicted as this evil scientist who, like I said, is trying to take over the tri-state area with his innators, only to get foiled by Perry in just about every episode. But despite this, he's more of a sympathetic character, but he also provides some of the funniest moments in the whole show. Like, he is just so freaking hilarious. Part of that is mostly because of the chemistry he has with Perry. Yeah, like, despite what it may look like, even though they do see one another as their big nemesis, it's more of a frenemy kind of deal. Like, they do fight each other, they do try to thwart each other, but, there come many episodes where they actually cooperate with each other like they were good friends, and heck, there are a few episodes where Doofenshmirtz actually considers Perry his best friend and actually a part of the family, and all of that shows a complex relationship between the two that's very fun to watch, but also very heartwarming as well. But there's also a lot of comedy with many of their confrontations, like that one in the Backyard Aquarium episode where they fight each other in a Star Wars-like fashion. I always consider that the highlight of that episode, and it's especially funny when Doofenshmirtz tries to use the Force at one point, and after a brief moment he's all, No, I'm just kidding, but I made you look, didn't I? That's a definite indication that the creators were huge Star Wars fans, but anyways, yeah. Just like the inventions and activities that Phineas and Ferb do, these confrontations can be just as unpredictable and lead to pretty funny results. Now, when I say that Doofenshmirtz is also a sympathetic character, I'm mostly referring to the crappy childhood that he had. Like, the poor dude just couldn't catch a break as a kid. Like, he was forced to work as a lawn gnome. He was raised by ocelots. Both his parents didn't show up for his birth. Like, how does that last part make sense? Like, what the heck was going through these parents' minds? I mean, my God. Talk about child abuse and neglect, man. But anyways, yeah. Those flashbacks are a reason why you feel really bad for Doofenshmirtz. But there's also the fact that he wants to, be a good father to his daughter Vanessa. Even though that he's bent on dominating the tri-state area, he loves his daughter deeply and will do anything for her, and it's this love that serves as a major point for the finale of the series, but I'll get to that later. Now, as for Vanessa, she's another one of my favorite characters in the B-plot, and I would actually say that she's one of my favorite supporting characters. She's portrayed as this goth girl who, at the beginning of the series, is often embarrassed by her father's antics, but she has her moments of awesomeness, like in Vanessary Roughness, and as the show progresses, she ultimately comes to accept her father's antics and craziness. And yeah, this relationship between the two is one of the most heartwarming moments in the B-plot, right up there with Doofenshmirtz's friendship with Perry. It's great stuff. So yeah, with all that said, and all these characters that were well written, It really helped you feel more engaged in the story despite the repetitive elements. And these definitely came into play when certain events in the show would go down, like when the movie Across the Second Dimension came out in 2011. I remember when that movie came out. By then I was huge into the show and I fell in love with the characters and just about everything else. But part of me was scared that this was going to be the actual finale of the show. Like, one other thing about that time was it was also when I was having trouble trying to avoid spoilers for upcoming movies that I was interested in checking out, like Toy Story 3. But I ultimately found out that one of the things that was going to happen was Phineas and Ferb discover Perry's secret agent identity. And since he's supposed to keep it a secret, I thought the show was going to end. Fortunately, with the episodes that came after the movie, that was not the case. Now, as for the movie itself, I enjoyed the heck out of it for what it had to offer. It had a very nice story that touched upon the relationship these boys have with Perry, and how much they love him even though they claim that he doesn't do much. And when they find out about his secret agent identity, it leads to a lot of conflict and it pushes some characters to their limits. Like when Phineas found out about Perry's secret identity, he was outraged and pretty ticked off. Like, that's a side of Phineas we rarely see in the show, so it's nice to see that, but it's also kind of heartbreaking in a sense. Like, he didn't know about Perry's secret identity until now in this dire time, and therefore he's pretty cheesed off about it. Not to mention he quickly assumed that Perry was just using them for a cover-up. It's really sad when you think about it, especially there are many moments before the movie where it shows that Perry loves his host family just as much as they love him. Fortunately, though, things get mended at the end of the movie, and they work a way out so that they can keep him by having their memories wiped at the end, and that's what opened up the doorway to the episodes that were to come after it. And when I say memory wiped, I don't mean they get their memories of the whole summer wiped. They just get the events of the movie wiped from their heads. But yeah, the relationship that Perry has with the boys is one of the big highlights of the movie, but there are many other things about it that made it awesome, like Doofenshmirtz's second dimension counterpart was pretty threatening, even though his reasons were kind of pathetic. He still proved to be a very threatening villain. I thought some of the second dimension characters, like the Firestorm girls and Phineas and Ferb and Isabella and Baljean and Buford, they were all pretty awesome too. And the movie's got an awesome soundtrack. Much like the episodes before it, the movie presented some songs that quickly won their way into my heart. Like, my two favorites were Summer, Where Do We Begin, and Everything's Better with Perry. They are so upbeat and fun, and the latter is actually pretty heartwarming and helps establish how much Phineas and Ferb love Perry. Everything's better with Perry, everything. And it actually won the #1 spot in the second musical Cliptastic Countdown. I should bring that up. And Summer, Where Do We Begin is also pretty fun, and it helps define the meaning of making the most of your summer and having a lot of fun with your loved ones. Heck, they even reference the title song at some parts. Surfing tidal waves, creating nanobots, or locating Frankenstein's brain. Ba-bum-bum. Finding a dodo bird, painting a continent, or driving your sister in. I think we're going a little too far. I'm not sure I don't remember how that last part went, but that's what I remember. I love it when they break the fourth wall like that. Oh, now that I've brought up the soundtrack, I should take this moment to talk about it, since it definitely deserves a mention in this video. Like I said, it's one of those things, along with the characters, that drew me into the show. Like, many of the songs in the show are very upbeat and catchy, and they match the theme of the show perfectly, like the title theme song. There's 104 days of summer vacation, and school comes along just to end it. So the annual problem for our generation is finding a good way to spend it. And then they go into all these different things that could happen in the show, and it's all done in the name of showing you that this is going to be a fun adventure, and they're going to try to make the most of it at any cost, and sure enough, we get to see them do all these kinds of crazy events, like not necessarily the ones mentioned in the theme song, though they do bring up some of them, like the one where it says they're giving a monkey a shower. Like, they actually do that in the episode Swiss Family Phineas, and when Candace sees Ferb doing it, she's all, You're giving a monkey a shower? And Ferb simply replies, yep, had to be done. That is so funny. Like, it's a classic break the fourth wall moment right there. Now, of the songs brought up in the show, some of my favorites include Gitchy Gitchy Goo and Candace and Vanessa's duet Busted, and Carl's theme song. Carl, he works the camera. Carl, he knows what all those buttons do. Carl. Sorry, but that was a very epic moment. I just couldn't resist. But there's also Agent P's theme song and that funny Drusselstein driving test waltz, and many, many others. But my all-time favorite song from Phineas and Ferb would have to be, undoubtedly, Summer Belongs to You. Similar to Summer, Where Do We Begin, Summer Belongs to You defines the meaning of making the most of each day, but the way it's incorporated in the special with the same name makes it very triumphant, while also catchy and awesome at the same time. Like, if you've seen that episode, when they dance to that music number, you can see Phineas and Isabella dancing with each other, and it's also nice seeing Candace acknowledge that she's very proud to have Phineas and Ferb as her brothers, even though she still tries to bust them. And it's also during this song where Candace and Jeremy officially become a couple, like they become a boyfriend and girlfriend, and that's another heartwarming thing to see. It's an amazing song that I highly recommend everyone listen to. It truly is a masterpiece in this show's soundtrack. Oh, and speaking of Summer Belongs to You, I should also point out that the special that shares the same name with the song I just talked about is actually my favorite episode in the whole show. With its nice adventure feel and its emotional drama with Candace and Isabella with their problems, and, like I said, the awesome songs, it's so fun to watch, and every time it comes on TV, I always make sure I check it out. It's that awesome. It also brings some of the ongoing plot arcs that have been happening in the show into the spotlight, like, specifically, Isabella and her feelings towards Phineas, and Candace's feelings towards Jeremy. But there's also the subplot with Doofenshmirtz and how Vanessa starts to accept his antics, as well as accepting that she's a little bit evil. Like, when Doofenshmirtz found that out, he started bursting into tears, and she was a little embarrassed, like, Dad! But the special went a step further when it started showing some emotional drama with Phineas when they were stranded on that island, and he slowly started going into desperation and trying to get off the island, but he would give up. But it was at this moment when Isabella suddenly realized that this wasn't the kid that she fell in love with, and she gave him a serious pep talk, and this motivated him to getting back on his feet. That little moment was especially heartwarming, and it showed how much of a loyal friend Isabella is towards Phineas. And that definitely made the difference between success and failure. And it further made watching the Summer Belongs to You song sequence more heartwarming. Like Phineas and Isabella dancing with each other, and heck, when they actually got to the backyard right before the sun disappeared, they started celebrating, and at one point Isabella just gave a huge hug to Phineas saying, "You guys are the greatest!" or something like that. Those are also great reasons why I consider Summer Belongs to You my favorite Phineas and Ferb episode. And it further made me value and treasure these characters so much more, up to the point where if something bad happened to them in an episode, I would freak out or something. Or maybe freak out's a little too strong of a way to describe it, but more like just worry about their safety and hope that they get out in one piece. This was especially evident with the two-parter episode, Where's Perry? And when I say two-parter, I'm not referring to the usual half-hour-long episodes like Lake Nose Monster or Dude, We're Getting the Band Back Together. No, this one had two half-hour-long segments that featured the Phineas and the gang in Africa, and they aired on different dates. Like, after part 1 of Where's Perry, I had to wait for, man, I don't remember how long I had to wait, actually, but I had to wait quite a long time before part 2. The problem, though, was it ended on a serious cliffhanger where everyone had a serious dilemma, like, Candace had the sudden fear that Jeremy was breaking up with her after trying to talk with him on a phone, and Linda and Lawrence had this worry that they didn't have their dinner reservations for this restaurant they were going to. Well, those were pretty minor, well, except for the former. But the biggest cliffhangers on that episode were when Phineas and the gang plummeted into the uncharted gorge and Perry was zapped by all of Doofenshmirtz's innators and disappeared. And because of that, I was left on a cliffhanger and I wanted to know what happened. I was like, no, don't end like that! What happened to them? No! And my god, I was left with so much suspense that was stuck with me until part 2 aired. Again, I don't remember how long it took for part 2 to air on the Disney Channel. But yeah, when part 2 aired, everything was hunky-dory and A-OK. And it also added on to what was already an awesome episode. Yeah, that Where's Perry's Story. That was another great episode, and when I found out they were going to Africa, that instantly got me intrigued because of my interest in African animals, and part of me was thinking they would be paying homages to my favorite movie, The Lion King. And sure enough, when the episode aired, they did just that in some of the scenes. Like in the beginning of the Out on the Savannah song sequence, we have a shot of a sun going over the horizon, very similar to the opening shot in the Disney movie. And even though it was Buford holding a model of the sun in front of another prop, it still reminded me of The Lion King. And when I first saw that, I was like, holy shit, they're referencing Lion King! Or maybe not like that, but man, I was excited. But the episode also featured some nice character stories, like this one subplot with Candace and trying to get in touch with Jeremy, Buford and Baljeet discussing what it means to survive in the wild, or what it takes, I should say, and Isabella trying to muster up the courage to eat a grub in order to get a badge. But there was also, in part 2, when Perry got zapped to Africa, and Phineas was so determined to find him, and it further showed how much he loves the platypus. That's another very heartwarming moment. But there's also, the subplot with Carl, and he ends up getting zapped by one of Doofenshmirtz's innators, and he actually turns evil, and this leads to probably one of the most badass pieces of music in the whole show, Evil for Extra Credit. Oh my god, I love that song. You heard it here first, 'cause I'm the one who said it. Yeah, I'm evil. He's evil. I'm evil for extra credit. Oh my god, that is another great song. Seriously, you gotta look up the soundtrack to this show, 'cause they made amazing songs. Freaking awesome! Oh boy. All of this was something that made Phineas and Ferb such an amazing experience. Though, there actually came a time where I wasn't catching some of the new episodes that were airing around when Season 3 and Season 4 were going on. I don't know if it was because the show was moving to Disney XD or something, but I don't know. Not only that, but when I did check out some of the episodes, they weren't bad. I just didn't find them as memorable as some of the older ones. Not only that, but I was getting into other shows, like I was getting into My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. I was starting to watch Littlest Pet Shop and Pound Puppies, all of which were on the Hub channel, I think it was. Now it's called Discovery Family. And when I did check out some of the new episodes, some of them presented some really weird ideas. Like, I think there was one where Jeremy revealed that he still had his baby teeth, which I find really odd and kind of gross. But despite all this, my love for Phineas and Ferb did not go away by any means. Heck, if anything, I would have been very excited to check out more episodes. Eventually, though, I would start to move on to Disney XD, and that's where I would catch Phineas and Ferb more frequently. Not only that, but this was also when some of the specials of Season 4 were starting to air, and like Summer Belongs to You and Where's Perry, they were just as spectacular. Like Mission Marvel, where we got to see Phineas and Ferb cross over with some of the Marvel heroes. It made sense at the time, because back then, that was when Disney bought the rights to some of the Marvel characters, and we later got the Star Wars special. Yeah, Disney also bought Lucasfilms, and there was also the Save Summer special, which really brought up the stakes and suspension. Oh, speaking of, that's something that these recent specials did very well at, as well as adding more emotional drama. Like in Mission Marvel, we got a rare chance to see Phineas actually get angry at Candace. Like she was only trying to help the heroes get their superpowers back, though she kept accidentally screwing up, and this led to Phineas just blowing up on her and getting all pissed off and whatnot. And despite all that Candace has done throughout the show, I always find those scenes very hard to watch because She wasn't trying to bust them, she was legitimately and genuinely trying to help out, and seeing Phineas get all angry at her is just so heartbreaking and sad. They do patch things up at the end of the special, and that's nice to see, but still. Though in a humorous way, they use that for a fourth wall joke and save Summer, like when Phineas is trying to convince Candace to go into the attic that's full of spiders, Buford is all, "This must be a special episode. He's yelling at Candace." That's a funny part. Save Summer was also awesome for showing that Doofenshmirtz is only willing to go so far in order to achieve his evil ambitions. Like when his fellow evil scientist Rodney uses one of his innators to move the Earth away from the sun, therefore starting another ice age, Doofenshmirtz is eventually shocked and appalled by this action, claiming that he doesn't want the world to be destroyed if it meant conquering the tri-state area, and by the end of the episode, he's trying to destroy the innator with Perry's help, along with Major Monogram and Carl and Monty Monogram, and it works in the end. And it's this action, along with the invention that Phineas and Ferb make in order to move the Earth back into orbit, that saves the day in the end. It also further goes to show that even evil has standards. That really helped flesh out Doofenshmirtz's character much more. So yeah, these specials really helped the show go to new levels with its storytelling and intensity. The one special that definitely had me on the edge of my seat was Night of the Living Pharmacists. When that episode aired back in late 2014, I actually did find myself freaking out because of all the scary stuff that was going on. Like, that's the episode where one of Doofenshmirtz's innators turns his brother Roger into a repulsive zombie-like clone of himself. And anyone he touches turns into a repulsive zombie too, like pharmacist zombie, I should say. And they quickly spread around Danville, and it's basically a zombie apocalypse-like story, and seeing Phineas and the others in this situation had me, like, freaking out if they would turn into zombies themselves. And they actually do throughout the episode, and it's very heartbreaking and scary when that happens. Like, this is like what happened with Where's Perry, where the characters were in a serious situation that could mean life or death, or maybe not so much death, but seeing them turn into pharmacists and going on, "Lots of me, lots of me, lots of me," it's just scary, man. I mean, sure, they all get turned back into their normal selves, but still, that's pretty intense. But nonetheless, it still makes for an amazing special. One other thing about Night of the Living Pharmacists that I loved so much was how they brought the relationship between Isabella and Phineas into the spotlight in certain parts. Like in that episode, Isabella's trying to muster up the courage to tell Phineas how she really feels about him in order to get this emotional bravery patch. It's not until the end of the special where she finally does it, and even with that, when the characters are trying to survive the zombie apocalypse, Phineas is making sure that Isabella is safe throughout the event. And when Isabella confesses to Phineas near the end, it leads to a very heartwarming but also sad moment, because before Phineas can talk about how he feels, he gets turned into a pharmacist himself, and this leads Isabella, the only one left, to stop the invasion. One thing, though, that bugged me about Night of the Living Pharmacists was, after everything's all settled and we can relax after everyone is turned back into their normal selves, we find out that Phineas and Isabella forgot about the confession. I'm not sure how they forgot about it, but yeah, when they meet up at the top of the water tower, they're all like, "What happened?" I was like, "What the heck, guys? You don't remember the confession? That was such a great moment." Good lord. But it's not a huge flaw in the episode. It was just a minor nitpick, and whatever way you put it, it was still a fun special, and that actually left the door wide open for 2015's episode, Act Your Age. And this was around the time where I found out that 2015 was where Phineas and Ferb was at last going to end. When I first heard the news, I was at first really sad about it, but I didn't really think about it yet. I was still looking forward to the new episodes, and starting with Act Your Age, that was a very bittersweet episode with a lot of emotional drama. Not just with what the characters do, but we see them as teenagers, and they're about to go their separate ways and go to different colleges and universities, and that in itself is really sad to see, but at the same time, really nice to see them as teenagers, and they're carrying on with their journeys in the circle of life. But the biggest emotional factor about that episode is seeing Phineas and Isabella's relationship at last come full circle, because in that episode, Phineas finally learns that Isabella had a crush on him when they were kids. Phineas spends most of the episode trying to find Isabella and talk with her about it, but while this is going on, Isabella is about to leave for college herself, and we actually learn the sad news that at some point when they were in high school, Isabella gave up on trying to form a relationship with Phineas. Seeing that it really tugs at your heartstrings, especially with the song What Might Have Been. I consider that the saddest song in the whole show, even sadder than City of Love from Summer Belongs to You. Fortunately, after that somber duet, we reach the climax where Phineas at last meets up with Isabella just outside of his house, and they at last have a heartfelt talk about it, and ultimately Phineas decides to go to the same college as Isabella so they'd be together. And seeing that is very nice, but the episode takes it a step further, like with Ferb and Vanessa's help. Phineas chases down Isabella as she's leaving, and when she's stopping at a stoplight, Phineas comes up to her and she's all, "What are you doing?" And Phineas simply replies by giving her a big kiss, with the beautiful music in the background. Seeing that is always so emotional, and it can make someone who's watched the show for years cry. Heck, at the very end, it cuts to a live-action shot of Dan and Swampy, and Swampy just bursts into tears over seeing this, and it goes to show that he really loved working on this show too. Don't worry, Swampy, you're not the only one who got emotional at that scene. Trust me. Seeing Phineas and Isabella at last get together in that episode was one of the most satisfying moments I remember from watching the show, and I'm very happy that it happened at that time because a few months later, after many years of bringing so much joy, the show would at last come to an end with the finale, Last Day of Summer. Well, before the finale, I remember Disney XD showed all of the episodes back to back in a marathon, and they included the movie and the specials, and then finally, Last Day of Summer started premiering, and like the other specials, it was an amazing episode, and it brought more things full circle, like Doofenshmirtz and his ambitions. In that episode, Doofenshmirtz finally conquers the tri-state area in a sense, by becoming the Tri-Governor of Danville. But this is not for evil ambitions, it's actually to show Vanessa that he's not a loser like he thought, and it's to convince her not to move away from him. However, Vanessa replies by spelling out Doofenshmirtz's character in front of him, claiming that he's not really evil, but rather a nice guy just pretending to be evil, and all that he's done throughout the summer was mostly related to trying to get even with his backstory. Once again, crappy backstory. But, this actually hits Doofenshmirtz hard, and rather than try to ignore it or argue against it, he actually agrees, and this leads to him deciding to be a good guy from now on. But not before trying to create one last innator to fix everything that's going on already. While Doofenshmirtz is off doing his own character development story, Candace has problems of her own. Since this is the last day of summer, she has one last chance to bust her brothers, and she actually uses one of Doofenshmirtz's innators, I think it was called the Do-Over innator, and once she activates it, the last day of summer starts repeating in a Groundhog Day-like fashion, and she tries over and over again to bust her brothers. Though she keeps failing, the day keeps repeating it over and over again. She rejoices in that, but each passing day, it gets shorter and shorter, and terrors from the space-time continuum start coming and sucking things into a void, and when that happens, people forget about those things. And it gets very serious when Phineas and Ferb end up getting sucked into one of those rifts. When that happens, Candace spends the rest of the special trying to get them back, with Isabella and Buford and Baljeet's help. Once again goes to show that she loves her brothers and would be devastated if she lost them. In fact, part of me thinks that after what happened in this episode, Candace might actually forget about trying to bust her brothers and instead join them in their fun. There might have been some moments in the holiday episodes that take place after the summer, but anyways, yeah, this is especially evident in the final scene because after they rescue Phineas and Ferb and get back to reality and destroy Doofenshmirtz's Do-Over innator by pushing the self-destruct button, boom! Everything goes back to normal, and they all sit around in the backyard talking about the summer and how much fun they've had. Doofenshmirtz, on the other hand, has a moment like this as well, where After he makes Time Straighten Outinator with Vanessa and Perry's help, and after he pushes the button, everything goes back to normal with them too. Though, to be fair, the Inator wasn't plugged in, but it was still nice to see Doofenshmirtz try this heroic moment. And even with that, he doesn't notice it was unplugged, and he still vows to be a good guy from now on. And when all that's said and done, there's a moment with him, Vanessa, Perry, and Norm talking with each other about the summer, and despite all the crazy stuff that happened with them, it was still very memorable, and they're happily remembering fond memories and growing closer with one another. The same could be said with Phineas and the gang, but the one thing about that final scene with them that made it all the more heartwarming was when Phineas brought up that the best thing they made from that summer wasn't actually the inventions, but the memories they made with each other. The more I thought about it, I thought that was the perfect way to cap off this adventure. And it made so much sense because when you do something fun with your friends and family or any other loved one, the memories that you make with them are what will stick with you for the rest of your life. And the way the show incorporated that with Phineas and Doofenshmirtz and their respective gangs, it just made so much sense. And it especially helped with the fact that this premiered after the big marathon with all the adventures that we got to see with Phineas and the others, and it was just so awesome and perfect. And the finale ended with two songs, Time Spent Together, which was a slow but very sweet and emotional music number, saying that it was all about spending time with one another, and the final song, Thank You for Coming Along, which features the characters singing to the audience and thanking them for watching their show. And finally, at the very end, after the credits, after Phineas and the others go into the house, Phineas peeks out of the doorway one last time, looking at the audience, and he waves goodbye. I'll never forget when I saw that. I actually waved goodbye back to him, as a way of saying thank you for all the amazing adventures. And that thank you wasn't just directed towards Phineas alone, it was also directed towards all the other characters, but also the creators. They made this incredible show, and they have my thanks. So yeah, with Last Day of Summer having aired, that was the end of my experience watching Phineas and Ferb, and I stuck around with it towards the end. And after 8 years of bringing so much joy to my heart, the show ended with a bang. At first I was really sad about it, and it was a bittersweet moment, but it didn't take long for me to feel much better, and it wasn't overwhelmingly tragic, like if I lost a family member. No. I'm actually happy that the show ended like this, and I wouldn't imagine it any other way, and I'm also glad it didn't turn into something like SpongeBob or Fairly OddParents, where it was milked into something that just wouldn't end. And now that it's over, Phineas and Ferb can now be treasured for years on end by many fans, similar to what's going on with Gravity Falls and Beast Wars and all the other great cartoons that have ended but still have a large fan base. And not only that, but I think it was the day after Last Day of Summer aired where I got to watch the new episode of My Little Pony at the time, Slice of Life, the 100th episode. That was another thing that made me feel better. Even though Phineas and Ferb was over, I still had shows that I still loved watching, like My Little Pony and Littlest Pet Shop. Plus I was getting into other shows like Gravity Falls, and I would eventually get into Star versus the Forces of Evil. I had all these other cartoons that made me feel better, and it worked. I know that a few months after Last Day of Summer, they aired Alka Files, but it was a standalone special featuring Perry and Doofenshmirtz working together as secret agents for Alka. And, yeah, I stay tuned for that, but I didn't really dig it all that much. It wasn't really the same as it once was, and I thought the inclusion of the fleas was really awkward and out of place. But despite all that, it didn't take away the joy that I had from the finale. And I still consider Last Day of Summer to be the official finale of the show, and that's what I prefer to stick with. Not saying I hate Alka Files, I just didn't really dig it all that much, that's all. But yeah, with Phineas and Ferb over, I still had all these other great cartoons to look forward to. And just because Phineas and Ferb was over did not mean it was completely gone. The show continues to have reruns on Disney XD, not as frequent as some other shows like Gravity Falls, but from time to time it'll show up, and when it does, I usually look forward to it. It brings out reminders of the experience I had watching the show when it was new and when it was bringing out new adventures and episodes and specials, and and that incredible time of getting to know the characters and all that kind of stuff. And also, it wouldn't be until the following year where Dan and Swampy would return with their new cartoon series, Milo Murphy's Law. Yeah, that show's still going on to this day, and I still watch it, and like Phineas and Ferb, it is a great series with a lot of fun characters and stories, and it might as well be on its way to becoming one of my favorite cartoon shows ever. Right up there with My Little Pony, Phineas and Ferb, Beast Wars, classic SpongeBob, and a few others. So yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say. That's what I wanted to talk about with my experience with Phineas and Ferb and how much the show means to me. It was something that I always looked forward to watching, and it made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me root for the characters that I grew to love so much, and yeah, looking back on that experience, it was something else. Let me tell you, it was something else indeed. And one final thing I should bring up before the video ends is, they're actually gonna come back in a crossover with Milo Murphy's Law. Yeah, that's right, guys. Next year in 2018, there's going to be a crossover with Milo Murphy's Law and Phineas and Ferb. When I first found out about that, I grew with excitement. This gave me a chance for me to reunite with old friends and have some nostalgia from my experience watching this cartoon and seeing them interact with the characters from Milo Murphy's Law. I'm definitely looking forward to that. And even if it doesn't quite live up to my expectations like Alka Files did, it won't be a problem. It won't take away the fact that Phineas and Ferb already had a huge impact on my life, and it truly was incredible. I'm sure a lot of other Phineas and Ferb fans will feel the same way. But yeah, happy 10th anniversary, Phineas and Ferb. Thank you for all the incredible adventures. Thank you, Dan and Swampy, and all the rest of your creative team for creating this cartoon. You forever have my gratitude, and I look forward to what you have in store with Milo Murphy's Law. And that's all I wanted to say about the show, and if you're at all curious to check it out, feel free to do so in any way you can, and you'll get to see what I've been through, and look up the soundtrack with all the songs. I'm not sure how many soundtracks they've released, but if you check out the show and the music, you'll definitely see where I'm coming from. And yeah, and feel free to share in the comments your thoughts on Phineas and Ferb and what experience you guys had with it. It truly is worthwhile. So yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Until next time, this is Kyle Grove, having just bestowed high recommendations on this cartoon, signing off.